Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 278 of Retro Encounter. My name is Eva Padilla. I am your host for this episode, and this one is going to be celebrating the 25th anniversary of Pokemon, a very special occasion. And to join me on this special occasion, we have some of our illustrious other RPG fan staffers, and we're also going to have us tell us our favorite Pokemon. For example, my favorite is the Gen 3 monstrous puppet known as Bayonet. Peter Triezenberg, what is your favorite Pokemon?
Hi, I'm Peter Triezenberg, and my favorite Pokemon is Espeon.
Espeon. And Quinton, what's up?
Hey, this is Quinton, and my favorite Pokemon is also Espeon, so that's wild.
Hey. Oh my gosh.
Whoa.
Incredible.
Bros.
That's a ditto. We call that a ditto mirror match right there.
Ooh, isn't that fascinating? And who is that just called a ditto mirror match?
I'm Niki. Hello.
Hello, Niki.
My favorite Pokemon is not ditto. It's Virizion.
Virizion.
Ooh, good choice.
That's a good one. Mm-hmm. And introducing new to Retro Encounter, it's Josh Lewis.
Hello everybody, Josh here, and my favorite Pokemon is the Vicious Hellhound Houndoom.
Yes! Ooh,
also good choice.
Ooh, I love this.
Puppy!
I am usually a big Gen 2 stan, so absolutely love that choice. So guys, we're all here gathered because we love Pokemon, and we're excited to celebrate this 25th anniversary of Pokemon. So I wanted to start this by kind of asking people, what was your first impression or the first time you came across Pokemon? What did it look like to you? Peter, what did it look like to you when you first came across Pokemon?
Okay, man. I have to go back because I was 6 years old. I was first grade. Around that time was like right at the tail end of Gen 1 and beginning of Gen 2. So Gold and Silver were brand new, and the first movie was on video. Second movie was in theaters, I think. And so it was just one of those things where it was like, you know, as a kid, like everyone's like getting into it and collecting the cards and playing the games. I didn't have a Gameboy at the time, so I sort of watched other kids play like over their shoulder. I was that guy. And eventually I got my own. By the time I got a Game Boy Advance in Gen 3 and played Sapphire version, and that was when I really started getting into the games. Aside from a brief hiatus when I was in high school, I've pretty much been a Pokemon fan ever since. It really has been one of those series that's stuck with me through a lot, and I'm glad that I'm glad to have had this in my life.
Yeah, I think that's something that a lot of us share. Josh, what was your first brush or first blush with Pokemon?
Okay, so we're going all the way back to the beginning. I feel like I was exposed to the anime before the cartoon or something like that, before I got the games. But I've been playing since the original red and blue versions when they were released in the US. And yeah, they just completely changed my life. I mean, they were really my first text-heavy RPG. So they kind of taught me to read in a way as well, in addition to... Oh, you probably heard my real-life Pokemon there. My dog's here. So,
Your
yeah, my Houndoom. And,
Puppy.
Yeah,
Puppy.
and... Yeah, Pokemon, I've been playing consistently ever since, you know, the first generation. Gold and Silver are probably my favorites to this day. I got really into the competitive aspect of it for a while, and that's kind of what I focus on for the most part these days, just because I like the mechanical nature of things, like understanding how things work and all that. And but I'll talk more about that when we get a little bit later on in the podcast. But yeah, I mean, I've been playing it for years, love it to death. It means the world to me, and yeah, I always look forward to seeing what Game Freak comes out with.
Absolutely. And yeah, there are so many mechanics that go into what Pokemon is today that have evolved, pun not intended, for
I get it.
For a quarter century. Nikki, what was your first take with Pokemon like?
It's kind of similar to Josh. My friend at the time would invite me over to her house and we would watch the anime together. But then one day in third grade, a friend of mine brought his Game Boy Color over and he had Crystal version and he really wanted me to play it. And so I played it. He insisted that I borrow the game and, take it home and play it and then bring it back. So I did. My parents didn't like that. They've never been a big fan of borrowing things. So they're like, take that back and give it back to him the next day. And I'm like, okay. So I did. But then, lo and behold, when I returned it to him the next day, my dad picked me up from school, took me to the toy store and said, okay, pick one of those and we'll get it for you. So I got a Game Boy Color that the paint was like metallic. It's shown in gold and silver, and it had like a Pichu and a Pikachu on it, and the little power button was Pikachu's cheek. So when it was on, his cheek glowed. It was really cute. So my first video game ever was Crystal. And although I haven't played the Switch games, I've played every Pokemon game since then.
That's a beautiful memory. Quinton, what about you?
Well, I have slight similarities with Niki's, just like Niki had slight similarities with Josh's. And so first of all, Niki, bless your friend. It sounds like he was really on an epic quest to get you into Pokemon back in the day.
Yeah, he really was.
That's determination right there.
It is. So I had a friend. It was 6th grade, and he's still a friend of mine to this day. His name is Eddie, and I'm going to make him listen to this later, so he'll be like, hey, I was mentioned. But anyway, I had just recently met him. He was wearing a Cloud Strife shirt, I think the day I met him or something like that. And I had asked him, oh, who's that guy? He looks cool. So he introduces me to FF7. So it's a few months later. And it was actually a little bit before Pokemon Red and Blue came to the West. And he had gotten his hands on it, and he was playing it ahead of time. It was like the Japanese version. And he showed me a little bit of it. I started, messing around with it. I didn't understand at the time. I mean, so I'm saying, like, is this going to have, like, an epic story like Final Fantasy VII? He's like, not quite. And then I'm saying, like, so I get on Route 1, I've got my starter, and I catch a Pidgey, and I was just freaking out. I was like, so this Pidgey's going to be with me for the rest of my life. And he's like, yeah, it's going to be with you for the rest of your life. And I was like, does he have, like, a character arc? And Eddie's just kind of like, if you want, So I have that. I ended up catching a Pidgey once I borrowed Blue from him, and I've been transferring that Pidgey ever since. So the character arc of that Pidgey is basically my life, I guess.
So is that Pidgey still around with you? Like...
Yeah, he's getting up there at this point. How long do birds usually live? I mean, he's like 25 at this point, right?
I'd say about that. That's awesome. As with a lot of y'all, yeah, it was a pretty similar thing for me. My sister and I used to watch the anime when we were younger. I am just about as old as the Pokemon series, and so my first blush with the games was for my 7th or 8th birthday. I can't remember at this point. My dad had gotten me a Game Boy Advance, and I looked this up because I thought it was like a Berenstain Bears thing, where it was like, oh, but I didn't actually get a Game Boy Advance with Pokemon Crystal. But for a while, they did sell Game Boy Advances that came bundled with a Game Boy Color game. And that was my first game, was Pokemon Crystal. I I think it messed up my eyes for life because I had pretty good vision, and then like 3 months after I got, the doctor was like, "Oh, you need glasses."
I can totally relate to that.
F.
Yeah, like yeah. I'm sure I absolutely messed up my eyes, but you know what? I get cute glasses now, and it was so worth it because I'm still playing these dang games today.
That's
yeah.
right. And now there's a backlight, so it's fine.
That's
right.
Yeah, and I can only mess up my eyes if I want to, dang it. And
Who needs eyes when you have Pokemon?
Exactly. I only have eyes for Pokemon, and sometimes I don't even have those.
There we go.
So I remember just playing that so much and training up my Poliwhirl to level 100 because I didn't want to evolve him into a Poliwrath, but I didn't have a link cable to make him a Politoed. So I just stuck with a Poliwhirl. And that was also my first plushie, and that's kind of where it all started, and still with the games today. And so it's kind of incredible that at the time, these small little Game Boy games from 1996 ended up becoming the biggest media franchise in the world. It is now a franchise of over $100 billion in revenue, which is just mind-boggling to think. It's bigger than some like Hello Kitty or Mario. So the Pokemon games, as we've seen, they took a long time to be developed. I think, Quinton, you had mentioned that there was like a 6-year development cycle, right?
Yeah, I was looking into it, and it's just kind of nuts. If you look for like concept art, early concept art, I'll see things here and there that are dated like 1990, and it's just thinking about it, like, wow, this was already in somebody's brain in 1990. It's wild.
Yeah, I had seen that it had evolved from the creator Satoshi Tajiri, basically wanting to collect insects and being saddened by the urbanization of his home in Japan when he was a kid, because there were less places to go out in nature and less places to go and collect these insects. And so he basically wanted to make kind of an insect collecting game, and it took a long time to do this because Game Freak, the company that makes Pokemon and still does, had started off just selling small magazines. It was kind of like a small Game Informer or a Edge, things like that. And then eventually they shifted over into game development, but they weren't Iwatas in terms of development or something. These were pretty unseasoned folks that had a great idea and amazing art, but weren't yet ready for that sort of big time. So it's kind of wild that it's evolved throughout the years to become this big thing. So what is it about Pokemon? What is the stuff that makes it so that Pokemon has become this? What do we think about that?
I think, it's kind of a collection of things, a collection of factors that factored into games about collection. That was horrible, but there was kind of this cool kids play games vibe back in the 1990s. I mean, it's still true today, but it was like this whole thing, slick hair, sunglasses, you're 10 years old, your dad takes you fishing or whatever, and then you come home and you hop aboard your PlayStation, your N64. So the Game Boy, it was already a thing for years, of course, but like this idea of sharing an adventure with friends, and you can do it while you're outside. You can play with your sister, your brother, kind of compete for who catches the most Pokemon. But there's a real journey to it all within like the campaign. And I think in Japan, since JRPGs were a big thing already, that was probably sort of a magnetic thing. Like, oh, there's this JRPG story going on. And then in the West, maybe it was more of the social aspect. I don't know. Get together during a sleepover, get your Kadabra into an Alakazam, and then, kind of wreck the Elite Four because Alakazam was an absolute monster back then. But yeah.
Oh god, psychic types.
Oh yeah,
OP.
yeah, they were totally unbalanced.
Them and and if you had a Gengar, like, it was game over for everyone else.
But not even because of there were no ghost type moves in the game besides like Nightshade and I think it was Lick. So
right.
it couldn't even use ghost type moves to do anything, and they were physical back then anyway. So, yeah.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
There was a glitch that made it so Ghost didn't affect Psychic, even though it was supposed to be weak to Ghost.
Yeah, I remember that.
And then the only bug move was like Twin Needle. So
That's right.
And then special stat. We did
You basically bring
We
your
got him.
Beedrill and pray, or the Alakazam just wipes you out.
Oh, goodness.
And I think Alakazam outspeeds, doesn't it?
I think so.
Yeah, Sam outspeeds Gengar
Yeah,
for
but
sure.
it has.
Alakazam was a good idea.
Yeah, it's. I mean, and that's kind of another thing with these games is that they were pretty. The early game was pretty unbalanced because this was a new team trying some real new things in this. Wow, I was having trouble with that. And so you had all this weird stuff like, yeah, you can pick your starter, and ostensibly by the end of the game, it depends how you trained the Pokemon up. But if you pick Charmander, you're gonna have some troubles with Brock very early on, and if you don't get a Nidoran to learn Double Kick, you are not beating him. Like, that's just not happening.
As someone who picks the correct choice in Gen 2, that being Chikorita, I know this problem very well. Almost every single gym in Johto is advantageous to Chikorita.
I hadn't thought of that before, but I suppose maybe only Morty?
Falconer is super effective, Bugsy is super effective, Whitney's not, surprisingly. All of Morty's ghosts are part poison. Chuck, I think, is like one of the few that you can deal with. Jasmine resists, Price is super effective, and then Dragons resist. That's what, 5 or 6 out of the 8?
Yeah, I guess Chikorita's hard mode,
They're
isn't it?
just jealous.
Chikorita's still the right choice, don't get
They're
me
just
wrong.
jealous.
Chikorita is the best, but yikes.
Meanwhile, you'll have a pretty good early game advantage with a Bulbasaur, since that'll give you an advantage over the first 2 gyms, at least.
I think this is all really.
I don't know.
This is all really posing an interesting point that I think kind of lends itself to why Pokemon is so popular as well. The fact that every single person who plays this game, they're going to play it a different way. No two people are going to play it exactly the same way. They're going to find different Pokemon. They're going to build their own team. They're going to go at things differently. So I think that replayability and that experience is something that really lends itself to, the popularity of it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that the gameplay mechanics and the amount of player expression that it involves, especially as it keeps going on and they keep adding more Pokemon, the capacity for the expression in playstyle, in personality of the Pokemon that you have, it just keeps expanding, and it keeps kind of making things even more inclusive in ways that are both subtle and quite unsubtle. It could be that there's a typing that's introduced, like Dark or Steel, that someone just really vibes with, or like in the 8th gen of Pokemon, they had the Hatterene Pokemon line, which basically just looks like a trans flag, and it's like, cool. That feels like very on the nose.
Yeah.
Hatterene says trans rights.
Hatterene says trans rights, absolutely. And I think that kind of goes into the with the player expression of it, it kind of goes into the mechanics, which is, I'd say, part of how exactly these games have evolved. So Josh, you had mentioned kind of earlier about how the games have gone mechanically. So what exactly has gone into the mechanics of Pokemon, you think?
I mean, if we look back at right at the beginning, even in their most basic state, Red and Blue, they are remarkably deep, but at the same time so horribly unbalanced and broken that certain types are just borderline unusable at times. Like if you look at the bug types, I mean, their base stats are so bad. Even in Gen 1, like, there's nothing that's really usable except for maybe Scyther. And but as we get through the generations, we introduce types like, as you mentioned, Dark and Steel. They are introduced to balance out the type chart. They Steel resists Psychic, and Dark is completely immune to Psychic. And then in the second gen, we're introducing things like held items. We're splitting up the special stat so that it's not just one stat, it's now two stats. In Gen 3, we're adding things like abilities that further help to individualize the Pokemon and make them, your own. And it just keeps going from there. I think the last really huge update to the mechanics came in Generation 4 with the Diamond and Pearl, the physical attack and special attack split, which just completely made so many Pokemon way better. Like Gyarados and Gengar, for example. Gengar, up until that point, it was primarily a special attacker, but both of its types, Poison and Ghost, they were physical attacks. So you couldn't really take advantage of that same type attack bonus that you would normally get. Same thing with Gyarados. Water was a special type at the time, so you couldn't use anything. You couldn't take advantage of its higher attack stat for moves like Waterfall or Surf. But when they split up the attack and the special attack split, all of a sudden, you have these Pokemon that are just powerhouses now, and they can actually fully take advantage of their types. Yeah, I think that was probably the last huge update to the battle system. The last really seriously notable one, anyway.
I don't know if it was just me, but I seem to remember bug types getting an insane buff in Gen 7. And I don't know if I was just not paying attention earlier, but all I remember is Leech Life suddenly Leech Life doing an insane amount of damage all of a sudden.
Yeah, they buffed the power on it.
Leech Life. Yeah, Leech Life went up in base power from I believe 20 to 80. Which completely changed things for so many of these physical-based bug-type Pokemon, or just Pokemon who can learn it.
So, Guzma's Golisopod practically wiped my party the first time I fought it, and I'm just I didn't think this was gonna be so hard. But here I am getting my butt handed to me by Samurai Bug.
Yeah, it's and that's one of the things with bugs over the years is that in the first gen they were so weak, and they are still the type that fully evolved Pokemon have the lowest base stats, but they have some very weird mechanics to them and some very interesting buffs, like having Leech Life getting buffed, or the Quiver Dance move, which was I think introduced in Gen 6, which raises special attack, special defense, and speed all by 1.
That's Gen 5, because that was Volcarona's move. Gen 5
Broken
gave us
Volcarona.
the
killer bugs. Yes, you're right. Yeah, Volcarona was immediately just out of the gate with that Quiver Dance. It's what is going on here? And
Volcarona is so good.
Yeah, and adding that... Oh, go ahead, Quinton.
Well, it's always been a little funny to me that in earlier games... we have this legendary creation story behind Satoshi Tajiri and his insect collecting and that sort of thing. And then you get into Kanto, and it's wow, these poor guys are useless. You'd think they'd be a little stronger. So it's over time they're finally reaching that level, and it's all very over the top. But I hope he's proud now that Leech Life is base 80. That's where it should have been.
I'm just glad that my boy Butterfree finally got its due in Gen 8, because Gmax Butterfree is amazing.
Yeah, and I think that's also part of the core appeal of these Pokemon, is that their ability for expression also changes based on the mechanics that they go around. For example, as I mentioned with Bayonet being my favorite Pokemon, Bayonet in Gen 3 plays very different from Bayonet in Gen 7 when it got a Mega Evolution, which, is no longer in Gen 8, but that was a sea change in what it did in both its form, its monstrous attack at that point, and giving it an ability called Prankster, which gives it priority for status moves and non-attacking moves. And I think that's kind of the wonderful thing, is that you have these Gen 1 Pokemon that their they don't change in terms of how exactly they look too much, although sometimes they do, but the mechanics around them can change. So a Pokemon that came out 25 years ago that maybe I never would have used in a million years suddenly becomes one of my favorites or something.
On that note, I do want to mention one quick thing. I did forget that the fairy type was introduced back in Generation 6 with X and Y, and that was actually incredibly huge at the time because at that point in the general like metagame or whatever you want to call it, dragon types were extremely scary and they needed to be balanced. So here's the fairy type. It's completely immune to dragon type moves, and a lot of them play a more defensive role. So as you were saying, with some of those Generation 1 Pokemon, like Wigglytuff and Clefable, they're now fairy types, so they have like completely different roles than they used to have back in the day.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I started running a mono fairy type team in Gen 7, and Clefable was part of that. Yeah, and it helped having those fairies in there because we stopped seeing Garchomps all the time in every competitive team. They're still around, but it's not as bad as it used to be, at least.
Thank God they didn't give Garchomp Dragon Dance with the newest gen. Can you imagine that? That'd be a nightmare.
No. Yeah, like, it was like Flygon. Yes, please give Dragon Dance. Garchomp, no. Please don't make this worse than it has to be.
In before Shining Diamond and Pearl and Diamond remix.
No. Peter, you have me scared now. Oh, no.
There's going to be the very first Mega Z-move equipped Pokemon, and it's only Garchomp.
Please no.
We want these to be faithful remakes. Garchomp is now overpowered again.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think as the mechanics have evolved, our ways of communicating and trading and battling have evolved as well. I mean, Niki, you had talked about like your friend giving you this, letting you play Pokemon Crystal, and I can imagine that throughout the years you've also introduced people to it as well as this cycle has kind of continued.
Oh yeah. Throughout my days, I've been kind of like, oh, Pokemon is for babies. Why are you playing it in middle school and high school? Like, yeah, that's right. Yeah. Very cool.
Then you go to college and you realize nobody cares, and you can do whatever you want.
We had a Pokemon club in college. I was the president my final year in college there. We had a gym system. So basically 8 of us would form up and we would make our own badges that we printed out, and then club members would come in and battle us, and then if they won they got an actual badge.
That's fantastic.
And then at the end of the year they got to fight each other in an Elite Four tournament to see who would become the champion, so that was pretty fun.
Niki,
Wow.
I love this so much. I love this so much. Oh, that's great.
Me too.
My team was Splash based. They saw this like Mega Gyarados used Splash, and like their face would just change. It was great.
Oh my gosh, was this before Z moves and before Splash?
Oh, Z Splash.
Actually.
Yeah, this was Gen 6. Gen 7 came out like right as I graduated.
Yeah, because and even the moves kind of evolved, because Splash had always been this useless move, and then with the advent of Z moves, suddenly Z Splash adds +3 to your attack all of a sudden.
Yeah. No, that would be a little too scary. I was supposed to be the first gym.
Oh, I see.
So I was like, all right, every Pokemon that could learn Splash I had on my team, because you can breed it onto a lot of Pokemon like Delibird, and I'm like, let's go.
You can... Oh my gosh, that's... Delibird has some very strange moves, as
Oh yeah.
They're all... Pokemon is, as you get to 800 plus Pokemon, you're bound to have some real weirdos in there, and Pokemon like Delibird and Smeargle really fit that bill very well.
I really enjoy that Niki like role played hardcore into this by sort of limiting yourself so much about this. You know, having that first gym leader mentality in mind. That's just great. I love it.
Oh yeah, we wanted the gyms to be accessible. We didn't want people coming in and then getting discouraged that they couldn't beat the first gym leader because they played with like fully Ivy bred teams and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, hey, you know, I'll do it. Like, I don't care if everybody beats me. They'll have fun. So here you go. Delibird used Splash. Oh, it can do that, huh?
And as we kind of as there's these different ways that we communicate and relate to the game, whether that's playing the video games or making role-playing, or we're watching the show, we're playing the card game, there's just so much to this franchise, and the way that we interact with it have changed in terms of the games. You know, we started off in 1996 with these novel link cables of being able to trade and battle with your friends if, you know, you were close enough and you both had this link cable. And as the years have gone on, it's amazing how the world of Pokemon has gotten smaller and smaller. You know, when I was a kid, I didn't even have a link cable, and so this was a single player experience entirely. And then when I was in middle school, I was showing my dad my DS, and I was like, "Oh my God, Dad! I just traded with someone in Japan, like someone in Japan, Dad." And he's like, "What are you talking about?" I'm like, "Look at this," and you know, now we're at the point where people are able to trade and battle throughout the world. And so, how do you think, like, Pokemon is kind of how do you think Pokemon is serving as a corollary to the way our world has become kind of miniaturized in some way?
I feel like it's sort of, it's, aside from just having that inherent appeal of, like, collecting and battling, there's sort of a universal language to that. But also, like, because Pokemon has always managed to sort of stay on the cusp of the new communication methods. So, like, the Wi-Fi connection on the DS took advantage of that. On the Switch, we have all that stuff pretty much built in right from the get-go. When Pokemon Go came out, like, everyone has a mobile phone, and all of a sudden it's like that blew up because all of a sudden this is accessible even to people who don't regularly play video games, and it's just sort of like, yeah. So I think they managed to just kind of find that worldwide market with, like, the right mix of, you know, multimedia presence and just that core appeal of collecting and trading and battling, and then just riding and making sure that they stayed relevant. Like, I don't have to go out and buy a link cable for my Switch to go trade Pokemon because tradition.
It's also interesting how the different ways that they encourage global trading as well. Like, if you breed two Pokemon from different countries, they'll have a higher chance of being a shiny when they come out of the egg.
I think one of the things that really intrigues me about the franchise, tying into what Eva was saying, is how sort of like the in-game vernacular, the dialogue from the NPCs and that sort of thing, has changed over time from, back when the GTS first came out in Diamond and Pearl, where it was like this huge thing, and everyone's like, I can't believe I can trade across the world. This is nuts. And I think that's kind of how, everyone felt back then. And then as the world around us has gotten smaller, you start to see a little bit less craziness in the games from the NPCs themselves reacting to it. I think with Sword and Shield, for example, it's still kind of presented like, hey, this is awesome, because it is, but it's not like, I can't believe that I'm about to fight this person in Japan, and you, player, shouldn't be able to believe it either. Like, it's there. And then with Pokemon Go, I still remember I was on a Greyhound It's an American long-distance bus company, in case anyone doesn't know. It was back in June of 16, I think, something like that. And I saw this kid and her dad, and I swear they were like catching a machop or something just in the wilderness of Montana. And it's like nothing else around. I mean, wow.
It really was pretty amazing when it first came out, that's for sure. I also just think it's kind of funny that, like, another thing about, aside from just the accessibility of the games, the way Pokemon has sort of transcended language barriers. Did you know Gaming did a really interesting video, I think it was them at least, about Pokemon's localization, how the English localization was, a lot of the Pokemon names here were like largely thanks to one guy. And then that became the basis for the other translations when they eventually branched out into other languages, which was just something I always thought was pretty funny. So even though, like, I think Pikachu is the only Pokemon that has, like, the same name in every region, it's just interesting how, like, some of those core tenets and identities of each Pokemon just kind of carry over, depending on who is, on where you're from, you know?
Yeah, the names might be different, but I'm sure a lot of people around the world can look at, they might have a different name for a Bulbasaur or something, but they know what's up when they see a Bulbasaur.
Mm-hmm.
And as these games have gone on, you know, when a franchise lasts this long, its core demographic and the people it's trying to reach is going to change, and the people it thinks it can hold on to kind of change. And I think we've kind of seen with Pokemon Go and games like Pokemon Let's Go, Pikachu, and Eevee, we've seen kind of a move from at least a segment of Game Freak and from the Pokemon Company to a more casual and younger audience, for better or worse. And I'm kind of wondering, do people think that, like, Pokemon is still for us? And is it actually, like, to the next generation, or is this still part of us in a way?
I don't think there's anything about Pokemon that makes it inherently limiting to its age demographic.
Yeah, I think it's kind of for everyone. Like, it's managed to stay relevant with kids, which is important because it's, you know, that is the target demographic. But they've also done a good job of keeping things around for older fans. And they've done a good job of, like, they haven't, like, conceded to, I know that this drives some parts of the fan base crazy, but they haven't really conceded to, like, a lot of fans. Like, oh, we are getting the open world game, but, like, we're not getting, we want a Pokemon game that has all the gens and all the Pokemon, and we also want it to be dark and edgy and rated M for some reason. And it's like, no, this game is for 6-year-olds.
Truly, we need the Shadow the Hedgehog of Pokemon.
No.
I mean, you say that, but that's basically what Coliseum was. But even then, like,
Hey, I like Coliseum.
Yeah.
even
I love
Coliseum.
I love how one of those games, I don't remember officially how it's said. What is it? Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness. It's
You
like,
got it.
yeah. So the XD, you know, like a lot of other people, I always see.
Why is it called Pokemon XD?
Yeah, like I'm always thinking, and so it tried to be a little edgy too, but then I see XD right there, so it's almost like it's making fun of itself.
One of these days, they're gonna make another horror game, and it's gonna be called Pokemon Uwu.
Oh no!
Oh no! Oh no! No! I don't think I can handle that.
I noticed your Shadow Lugia. Uwu.
Oh no!
Oh no!
Ooh,
that
what's
is a
this?
dark.
This is Mewtwo, and he's slaughtering innocent.
Oh no! Oh god!
Rated M for graphic
Oh
content.
no! Oh, we don't need to go down this road.
This is not how I wanted my Coliseum 3. This is not how I was hoping it would go down. This is not it. This is
A
just not it.
Faustian deal.
Oh god, for monkey's paw curls. But for all kidding aside, though, I do think though that it's important that Pokemon has managed to stay user friendly, but also age appropriate for newcomers, because that's part of the why I think it has such universal appeal. Is if you're an old fan who's like, who's nostalgic for it, you can still go back and play with your favorites, and they're all still there, and the core concept is the same. But it's also, it's easy for kids to get into and understand, because that's how that's how these franchises keep going.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think maintaining that sort of, universal appeal and that core to the games to be able to reach, at this point, across generations is so key to it. And being able to reach out to younger kids, and, when I hear stories of my friends' kids, jumping up and down and telling me about their favorite Pokemon and such. It's really a wonderful thing, because I'm like, I used to be that kid too, and in some ways I still am, because of how happy this franchise makes me. And so even if they're like, they kind of have to broaden their appeal for how massive a franchise is, our generation is still a big part of that user base and of that fandom. So if you're the head of Game Freak and the Pokemon Company, what exactly would you want to see from Pokemon going forward? And I guess Josh, what would kind of like get you for Pokemon going forward?
I mean, I understand that the sorry, let me gather my thoughts here really quick. So I understand that there is a value in the universal appeal of Pokemon as it is right now. However, I mean, while the game has evolved mechanically, structurally, it still uses the same formula, and it's still, at its core, it's still the exact same thing. So I guess really what I'm looking for in new Pokemon games is for Game Freak to take more risks and really capture some ambition, make some big changes. And that kind of was why I was so excited to see Pokemon Legends Arceus in the most recent Pokemon Presents. It represents a major shift towards something that I don't think anybody was expecting, really. It kind of just came out of nowhere, so I'm kind of shocked that they even want to go that route, because up until now they've just played everything so safe. They've, all the games have been largely the same at their core. I mean, they switched things up a little bit with Sun and Moon by removing the gyms, but really, I mean, the Island Trials, let's face it, they were gyms, right? So,
Right.
different coat of paint, which is still like something, but never really a big shakeup of the formula. Coliseum and XD, honestly, like they were probably the biggest shakeup, because they didn't have gym leaders. They had kind of more traditional. It had a more traditional JRPG structure. That's what I'm curious about with Legends. Is I want to see if it. Okay, so is this going to be? I want to know what else there is to do besides catch Pokemon.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm curious. Yeah, it's definitely a big step for the series.
Yeah, that's I guess that's really what I'm looking for in new Pokemon games. I mean, you look at Pokemon and the as a series, I mean, there are like well over 800, 900. How many do we have now?
I think we're getting to 900, honestly.
But there are all these regions, and there's so many there's so much opportunity to tell these stories and build these worlds, and really like let us see like what this world is all about in like a completely different way than we've seen it before. I really want to see Game Freak take more risks with their IP in that regard, because let's face it, Pokemon's going to make money no matter what they do with it, right? So,
Right.
Yeah.
There's always something that's going to appeal to someone with Pokemon, and I think that's kind of accurate, that there is only so many risks that they can take, because once you become kind of the royalty of the media landscape, there is kind of a conservatism that steps in to retain your crown in a way. And I think that kind of goes into this question that I was thinking about a lot. I don't usually pay much attention to basketball, but I had heard a quote from Steph Curry earlier this week when he had said, I have a lot to accomplish, but nothing left to prove. And that made me kind of think about this, upcoming conversation about Pokemon. How accurate do we think this statement is to the Pokemon franchise?
That's a good one. I like it. I like the insinuation. I'm not sure I entirely agree. Maybe I would have even just a few months ago, even. But now we've got all this hype for Pokemon Legends, Arceus, and the Diamond and Pearl remakes. They're mostly outsourced. Not everyone's crazy about their look either. I think they look great, whatever. But all eyes are on Arceus now, at least in my anecdotal experience. It's new, it's different, it seems bold. So I want Game Freak to go out there and prove they've got the chops for this. Possibly this, cliche as it is to say, but possibly this evolution, this big next step. And they certainly do need to prove that. And I'm on board with it either way. But if they can go farther with this, that'll be great.
I sort of feel like we're past the point that Pokemon is the plucky experiment, because it really was when it started out. It was an unprecedented endeavor. But nowadays, like we've been saying, it's this huge multimedia empire, and yeah, it's a little. And while I do think that the formula is part of the appeal, it's not like they couldn't afford to branch out every now and again. Which is why I'm thinking Legends will hopefully be kind of that, and maybe it'll offer this sort of two-tiered experience for Pokemon. And maybe that will also be good for the franchise's longevity. Because, we've reached a point where, okay, so the Gen games, when, Gen 8 came, I enjoyed Sword and Shield a lot, but they were controversial and didn't live up to a lot of people's expectations, some of which were reasonable and some of which were not, but there were flaws to be pointed out, and the game really did seem okay, well, this could be more. What it is fine, but it could be better. And even going into the Sword and Shield DLC, it's wow, this is a lot more polished and a little more fleshed out, and I like exploring these zones a lot more than I liked exploring the base game zones. So maybe we'll see more of that going forward.
Peter, what you were saying just now about it being just fine, I swear, right before that Pokemon Presents presentation, I was working on this big feature about how Pokemon needs to evolve, very much the conversation that we're having right now. And, I wrote in that feature at the time, if you are fine with Pokemon being just fine, then that's great. I'm happy for you. But at the same time, should we settle for just fine?
Yeah, no, that's totally fair. And, sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Oh, no, but like I said, that's totally fair. And it's one of those things where it's franchises like Pokemon, they do need to keep their audience engaged. And while the formula is, again, it's good for familiarity, it's good for bringing on new players, for longtime fans who played every single gen, you can't really keep releasing the same game as you did in the late 90s. And I know that's an oversimplification, but I think the sentiment holds true that you really do want to see them strive for something greater, even if they don't quite make it. Even if it's a swing and a miss. If Legends ends up coming out and it's running at 14 frames a second and your Switch will explode after you play it, then maybe we'll be okay, Game Freak, maybe don't bite off more than you can chew. But still be glad they tried.
Yeah, I prefer something not panning out because they tried something new rather than something not panning out, but it's exactly the same as before, so why did it not pan out?
Right. And I think that kind of represents that there's, with game development, there's, especially with these long-running franchises, there are fans that, sometimes I think all of us on here have pretty reasonable thoughts and have like coherent strains of this is what I'd like to see. And then there's also just throngs of fans who will say things that are like they exist in tension with each other. They're like, I want it to be completely new, but I want it to be so nostalgic and old. And and as game developers, I'm not like, oh, the poor, like the poor Pokemon company. But as artists who are making games, I sympathize with that when you have these expectations, and these expectations are so much different from so many of your demographics around the world, you can only do so much with that. And because of that, a lot of times it is that regression to the conservative mean of it. And I agree with y'all that seeing something like Pokemon Legends is something that I'd really like to see going forward, and how it could possibly build on the DLC of Sword and Shield, and that idea of having these more wild areas, these open worlds, because it can broaden that appeal. And I think that kind of brings us to kind of the close of this conversation, is that we've talked a lot about what this franchise is and what it has become and how we've related to it, whether that's through real-life role-playing, whether that's through tournaments and mechanics, whether that's just through the personality of the Pokemon. So I kind of wanted to ask us to like dig a little bit, and I wanted to ask, what does Pokemon mean to you when you think about it? And Niki, we start with you.
It's connection. And here's why. Because not only you connect with your link cables and all these fancy things, you young kids with your technology and your cables and whatever, but also because you can play together and fight each other. And if you lose, you say, oh no. And if you win, you say, very cool. You could, trade the Pokemon cards. Or if you can find some that the scalpers didn't get to already, you can buy the Pokemon cards. What an idea! What a concept!
Yeah. Hey,
wow.
grown adults buying Happy Meals. What is wrong with you?
I don't mind grown adults buying Happy Meals as long as they leave some for everyone else.
I don't mind them buying Happy Meals. I do mind them buying them in
buying
bulk.
The whole store out. Yeah, you could buy the toys. You could trade the toys when you don't want the toys anymore. You donate them. You can talk to people about it, and it's all about connection. Here's an additional anecdote. When I was filling in for an open teacher position in a third grade class for a few months, of course I got to know the students in that time, and they liked Pokemon and I liked Pokemon. They're like, oh, Miss F, what's your favorite Pokemon? And I wasn't going to tell them Virizion, they don't even know what that is probably. So I told them the easy ones. I'm like, Mudkip and Snivy. And a few months later, when the position got filled and it was my last day there, I had to go to a different room for a little bit. They called me back, and the main teacher of that room was like, Miss F, we have a surprise for you. And the kids brought me this card that they made. I still have it. And it's like, thank you, Miss F. And they, in their little third grade way that they don't really get it quite right, but it's still really cute, they drew a little Snivy and a Mudkip playing together, and they all signed the inside. And that's like the kind of connection that you can just get from people just by saying you like a certain Pokemon. It doesn't even have to be that deep, oh, I fought you in a duel to the death and you didn't go to the Shadow Realm. No, it can just be like a conversation,
Did somebody say Shadow Realm?
Oh.
But yeah, those things, they stick with you,
I'm not crying. You're crying.
That's really, really sweet, Nikki.
It was very sweet. I still have the card. I love it. It's wonderful.
Oh. Quinton, what does Pokemon mean to you?
So there's kind of a beauty to me. I'll start with something that seems kind of tangential. I got there, but there's this real symmetry between the creations of both Pokemon and The Legend of Zelda. We were talking earlier about how Satoshi Tajiri grew up collecting insects, and he brought that to life in a digital space. Shigeru Miyamoto, as a lot of us know, his whole thing with the original Legend of Zelda was this desire to rekindle the feeling of his boyhood. Exploring the woods and caves near Kyoto, he went hiking, found a lake, he loved it, he wanted to bring that into gaming, so Zelda was his miniature garden project, a reflection of those times. And for me, Pokemon has always meant escapism, but the kind of escapism that doesn't necessarily tie me to my chair and mess up my posture even worse than it already is with a lot of these other darn games I play. There's nothing more soothing to my soul than a stroll through the woods with my whatever at my side. Now it's my Switch. It used to be, 3DS, DS, etc., etc. Pokemon remains a big, big part of that. It's active escapism, if you will. Kind of the culmination of Miyamoto and Tajiri's visions. I'm in my early 30s now, and I still love finding lakes and state parks, taking a break, catching a Pikachu. It'll never get old for me.
That's beautiful. Yeah, you guys are making me feel all warm and fuzzy.
Aww.
Peter, what has Pokemon meant to you?
I think for me, Pokemon has sort of meant comfort, and it's sort of to me, it's one of those things that's like always been there, and very likely will always be there. It's like I can play this game, and I know what to do, and I go on an adventure with these creatures, and all my friends in real life like are going on the same adventure, and we can trade experiences, and it's just sort of stuff that like I mean, I guess a little cliche, but it's like it takes me back to when I was 10 years old, and I was playing pretend with my friends, and and really not a whole lot has changed. Like, it's like, okay, here I am, and I can still come back to this,
Yeah, absolutely. And Josh, what has Pokemon meant to you? I'm like a little just winded from all this. This is wonderful.
Pokemon means to me, I mentioned it earlier in the podcast, but Pokemon was one of the first games that I got really into. It was one of the first text-heavy games that I really got to know and love and appreciate, and I just kind of gained an appreciation for like the stories that can be told through these kinds of mediums. I mean, Pokemon's not really known for having incredible complex plots or stories or anything like that, but it's not really about the stories in the games themselves necessarily, but the stories that you yourself have of playing the games, in a sense. And while the plots have gotten more complex over the years, all sort of I think that culminated a little into the DS's life cycle there, but that's beside the point, though. The point that I'm trying to get at, I guess, is that that love of storytelling was fostered at such a young age because of Pokemon and being able to experience these journeys and stories and going on an adventure yourself. I guess that's why it's stuck with me this long.
Absolutely. That spirit of adventure lives on through Pokemon and bleeds through to all these different RPGs and experiences that we love. Thank you all for that. And as for me, I think I've been enlightened by just some of the things that you guys have already said. Connection and comfort, adventure and experience and wonder. And I think a lot of that has gone into what Pokemon means to me as well. It was the first game I got. It was me riding on a plane back from seeing my family, and having another boy on the plane helped me catch Kyogre in Pokemon Sapphire, and someone who ended up actually living in my hometown. It was a very strange occurrence and still know him to this day. It was being able to, in the last few years, going to riding on a bus to a protest, and me pulling out my Pokemon game, and another grown adult pulling out their Pokemon game, and that person becoming one of my best friends. And it's gone to when I was a camp counselor, and I had a little girl who was going through a really tough time. Her parents were going through a divorce, and you could tell it was affecting her. And she really loved Pokemon. And, I didn't want to show favoritism, but for her birthday, I slipped a pack of Pokemon cards into her lunchbox while she was playing. And I didn't tell her that I gave her these cards. And then, after she has lunch and I'm over having lunch with the other counselors, she runs over and she's like, I just had these cards in my lunchbox. And look, it has Altaria. It has my favorite. And the look on her face is just the thing that I think I'm always going to think of when I think about Pokemon, and the joy that this little couple of Game Boy games that could turned into. So it's been really wonderful going through this sort of history and what we've loved about these games with y'all. So thank you for being on this panel.
No, you're welcome. Anytime.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I loved it. I was grinning from ear to ear, especially during just that last little question that we had. Everybody's answers, I love it. I'm happy to be here.
When the pack has her favorite Pokemon in it, it's called Destiny. Pokemon?
Right. Destiny Bond? Absolutely. As someone who loves using ghost types, I think that is very fitting. Don't come at me with my stalled Dusclops.
That's a classic.
But this has been episode 278 of Retro Encounter, celebrating the 25th anniversary of Pokemon. Thank you so much for listening and sticking around with us. So, this is an RPG fan podcast, and we have 3 other wonderful podcasts. Random Encounter, which is about random occurrences, Rhythm Encounter, which is about RPG music, and our wonderful partners over at Phoenix Edge, who cover a lot of current RPG news. You can rate and review us on the podcatcher of your choice. We absolutely love feedback, and we'd love to hear it from you, Pokemon or otherwise. And coming up on Retro soon, we're going to have some pretty cool episodes. We have 2 episodes on Muramasa the Demon Blade, the Wii game that became a PS Vita port from Vanillaware. We have more Final Fantasy XIV coming your way, and we've already done quite a bit, so it's just going to keep on rolling. And we're going to get to someone who is tangentially related to Final Fantasy XIV, Yasumi Matsuno's Crimson Shroud. So we have some really exciting things happening. But for the time being, if we want to reach out to people, how can we be reached on social media or otherwise? And I'll start with Peter.
If you want to find me, you can reach out to me on Twitter at IHaveFury. You can also email me, petert@rpgfan.com.
Excellent. And Quinton?
The best way to reach me is probably on Twitter, which my account handle is Quinton Writes, because I'm Quinton and I write.
Wow.
Mind blown.
Mind blown. And Josh, where can we find you?
Okay, you can catch me on Twitter at jlewis_writing, or you can visit my website, jlewiscreative.com. And that's Louis, not Lewis. Everyone spells that wrong.
And Niki, where can we find you on the internet?
Unfortunately, nowhere yet. My social media is a secret as I plot to revive Team Plasma. It's really hush-hush. It's the good Team Plasma, though. Don't worry.
Okay, we'll keep that a secret, to be sure, because I want to see that too.
Is
Ooh.
Getsus still hiding in like a dumpster somewhere?
We will make sure he stays in that dumpster. Don't worry. This is the good Team Plasma.
Good.
I'm willing to do terrible things to bring back N. I'm just saying.
Yes.
Anyway.
Yes.
So say we all.
So say we all.
I say the yay.
Yes, please.
And listeners, if you'd like to reach me, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram as @Evalise, or because I'm one of the social media people, you can find me on our general social media RPG Fancom accounts. So with that, thank you guys for being here. Thanks for listening, and we hope you have a super day. Bye.
Bye. I wanna
Adios.
the very
Have a good one.
best of no
one
one.
Dun dun.
To catch them is my real test. To train them is my call.